Hello, and welcome to
Bell on Earth.
My name is Cassidy,
My name is Casey.
and together we are the Bell Sisters. Join us each week as we corrupt your soul,
And bring you to salvation.
discussing life, death, and everything in between.
Are you afraid of getting into heaven?
Ding dong, motherfuckers, and welcome back to Bell on Earth, the podcast. This is Cassidy, and I just wanted to bring you a little up dizzy on what's going on this week. We decided to break open the vault and bring y'all one of our episodes from the first rendition of Bell on Earth. Only the true fans will remember this hot take. I will say the audio is a little bit rough here. This is from the early stages of Bell on Earth, so forgive us for not having the right equipment, but it's still really good, really funny, and a lot of points are made. Not all of them are correct, but all of them are right. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. My name is Cassidy,
And my name is Casey.
and we are your hosts of this chaotic, idiotic podcast that you've stupidly chosen to listen to. So today we have a very exciting topic, something from deep within our past. But first, a disclaimer. We are not very serious people, and we often use humor as a coping mechanism. So if you don't like that, you can go ahead and fuck right off because we don't really care. We are traumatized individuals, and we will cope as we please. Guess I'm being a little feisty today, but we have a pretty
Clearly.
feisty topic.
I was gonna
So do you want to get us started, Casey?
Sure. So today's topic is about it's not really a town. It's a little community basically called Oniontown, or referred to as Oniontown. So growing up, the kind of urban legend around our area was about this place called Oniontown, where there were inbred people there that were just crazy, and if you drove by, they would hunt you down basically and stare at you and all this creepy stuff. So we could hear a couple of accounts of people going to drive through, but other than that, it seemed more of urban myth rather than a real place. And it was kind of always that thing where you question is it real, is it true, what is the actual truth behind it.
Yeah, I do remember people in my grade telling me oh yeah, we went there and everyone had yellow eyes and
Right.
weird skin, and they were jumping all over the car and staring at us. But these were also people that I didn't necessarily trust
Right.
fully.
For sure.
So it always was kind of the thing of well, they could be telling the truth, they could be exaggerating, or they could have never actually gone. They're just telling people bullshit. But it was definitely a big thing, at least especially in my grade. And I graduated in 2015. We are from Westchester County in New York, if you did not know that. And that is around where Oniontown is.
So we were the border of Westchester and Putnam in a hamlet called Mayapack. So from Mayapack, it was about 45 minutes to an hour north.
Oh, really? It's that far?
Yeah, depending
didn't
on
know that.
how well you know New York, it's about 45-ish minutes east of Poughkeepsie, or about just under 2 hours north of New York City. So it's located in Dutchess County, which is the county above Putnam where we're from. And it's in the town of Dover, but in the hamlet of Dover Plains.
There's a lot of hamlets in
Yeah.
New York. There's a lot of weird not town towns and just places that have names, but they're a store.
Right, exactly. That's just like how New York is. I'm sure it's just because of the like history of like the settlements and stuff like that in early
And the
days.
farms and stuff.
And the
Yeah,
farms,
because
right.
there was a lot of farms in New York, so.
Yeah, because you don't really see like hamlets out in like the west or like the south or anything, at least that I notice.
Well, to be fair, they do have towns that are like giant, but there's still only like one store.
Right.
In the west.
That's basically a hamlet.
And all desert.
Right. So again, basically Oniontown, it's not a town. It's literally like 7 trailers at like the end of a dead-end road. It's simply a community. So basically the whole history, at least from what I've been able to find of it, is it actually dates back to quite a long time ago. The earliest known mention that I could find is in 1908, a book called Historic Dover. And it says, the only really reference in this book it has is, 1 mile south of Dover Plains is a little settlement composed of 2 classes, males that don't do anything and females that bring up the children and take the business off the old man's hands. So yeah, from the beginning, clearly there's some kind of stigma to it.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, from my understanding of the research that I've done, it's kind of just like a single community, maybe just like a small family, basically, that has just lived there generation after generation. Not incredibly educated, but not like bad people per se. Really, the biggest factor in all of this has been the fact that over time, especially closer to like modern day, a lot of people from New York City who had money started purchasing property further up north because they could, of course, get more bang for their buck. And so due to this, the area started obviously becoming increasingly more wealthy, but this small community didn't. So while I'm sure when everything first kind of started and they first settled in this area, they might have not been seen as the outcasts that they are seen as today. Of course, over time, as the area grows more wealthy, but this community doesn't, they're seen much, much more as outcasts because of just the way that they live. There's something that I had seen from, I actually really don't know when this was quoted, but basically they said, picture a community without an electric light, without a radio, without a movie house, without a bathtub, where the kiddies rarely get to the 8th grade in school, where illiteracy abounds, ... Rough, hard-bitten Oniontown is primitive. So again, for a long time, this has just been seen as a community of uneducated people who don't send their children to school, blah, 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 blah. They're dirty and this and this and that. Of course, again, they live in trailers. It's been described as a mountainside enclave filled with a haphazard collection of rundown trailers and a dead-end dirt road.
Mm-hmm.
There have been historically times when their high school basketball games, like I guess just the Dover team itself, not specifically Oniontown, but the Dover team, other teams would throw like onions on the court during the games, stuff like that. So again, there's been a lot of stigma historically. In terms of the name itself, it's kind of a toss-up. Some people believe it's come from what people would consider it as Youngstown due to the fact that there's so many children on the settlement. Others say it's because the people smelled like onions. Some people suggest that onion was once a slang for uneducated. So it really has kind of been tossed up in the air in terms of where the term Oniontown originated.
But it definitely stuck.
It 100% stuck. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So historically, the people of Oniontown have always, as been said, have seemed to be thought as kind of like less than or subhuman. Even the Dover post office, that's less than a mile away, actually doesn't consider this community part of the town, I guess. They don't actually receive mail. They don't have trash pickup, stuff like that. So they're very much outsiders, not only to the people that live in the community or like live in the area surrounding them, but also literally to the town itself.
Wow.
Which is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, it's kind of an abomination.
Yeah. So there have been accounts like throughout I guess like the history of knowing about the area, where people would kind of come in and just I don't really see many like accounts, so I can't like necessarily say exactly what happened, but I'm sure kind of like harassing them and whatever. Early on, people kind of left them alone and really saw them just as like outsiders and like purposely did not interact with them. Again, this community is in a dead-end road, so there's no real reason to be driving in the area if you don't live there.
Right.
So most people left them alone. But again, as the influx of wealthier people started coming into the area, there was, I guess, an increase in people, especially teenagers, going into the area, harassing the people, like driving around, throwing things or honking their horns and just overall being a nuisance.
Yeah, it's just an influx of annoying, stubborn, idiot teenagers who have nothing better to do with their lives because mommy and daddy buys them everything, and so they just have nothing else to do.
Right, exactly. So we know these people very well.
Yeah, we live there.
Exactly. So naturally, again, people started just harassing them.
And I think it's also worth mentioning that this area of New York, so if you don't really know New York too well, there's obviously New York City, which has its own like have and have-nots centers. But this part of New York specifically, this like lower part of New York towards the city, it's very, very much like you either have and you have a lot or you don't have. Right? Like, of course, we grew up pretty middle class, but and there is like a lot of middle class families, a lot of people who travel into the city and work in the city and stuff like that. So they do have a decent income and stuff like that. But this area is very like there's very much classism, like severe classism, and I think that's something to note, both just as a study of where we grew up, and also it's important to the story because you have like some really wealthy people here, especially kids who just like have never ever grown up having like less than what they've had, you know what I mean? Like they've always kind of had like a lot, and a lot of people look down on you for not having like the name brand shoes or the name brand clothes or like having like the car or like having a big house. Like even teenagers and even younger kids, I remember there wasn't necessarily like bullying, but there was definitely a lot of like, of course there was bullying, but there was a lot of like looking down upon people for not having what you have.
Oh, absolutely. Just a ton of like privilege in the area.
Pretension.
Right. Yeah. That just all goes unchecked, unfortunately. And so because of this, there's just a lot of entitlement. And this is, I think, where a lot of the urban legend of all the violence and stuff like that from like the Oniontowners comes from, is it's literally just kids literally harassing these people and them being fed up with it.
Yeah.
And so, of course, they're going to react because, again, this is a secluded community where you have no reason to be entering their property unless you live there. So, like, of course, if there's a strange car coming through, they're going to be wary of you. And I've heard of accounts where people would go in and, like, nothing really would happen. They would just stare at you because, like, if you're not really going to bother them, they're not going to do anything. However, there are accounts of the people in the area being violent. So basically the modern day bullshit kind of started in early 2008, where a YouTube video was uploaded and it was titled Oniontown Adventures. So basically 3 kids
from Mayapack.
No, not this one. This was the one before.
Sorry.
So, yeah, but shut the fuck up. You don't know what you're talking about. You know nothing of an Oniontown.
I guess I don't.
So 3 kids drive up to Oniontown pretending apparently like they're reenacting a scene from Deliverance, which I've never seen Deliverance, so I don't know what they're talking
Yeah,
about.
me neither.
While commenting on the quote little inbred hick village. So of course they're just kind of like making fun of them. They start like blasting like twangy country music, blah blah blah. They get there and start recording. And so of course, again, they're just stupid teenagers. They see a chicken and they're like, "Oh my god, look, a fucking chicken!" Like, bitch, you've seen chickens before.
There
Shut
are
the
chickens
fuck up.
all around this area, just wild in.
Exactly. And so they're just like in general, just going and like they're calling the people sketchy and stuff like that because they can like see them in the woods and whatever.
In the woods that they live in.
Right, literally. So yeah, nothing really happens in this video besides some really terrible jokes being said and just overall stupidity, but nothing really violent happens. So later that summer, possibly inspired by this video that was uploaded because this was like the first one that had been uploaded. So later that summer, another video was uploaded. And this is the one where it's two people from Mayapack, which is where we grew up. So, of course, this is not surprising to us. Which actually, I have seen this video. We both saw this video. And at first, when we watched it, we were like, is this like fake?
Yeah, it seems very fake.
Yeah, because I guess they didn't really record necessarily the people and stuff like that. Because at least what I saw in the description of the video, it seemed like they didn't realize they were still recording at some point. So like the camera's just on their lap and you can just hear basically the reactions and stuff like that. And you can hear like something like the car being hit by stuff and whatever. So if you try to look up these videos, you're probably not going to find much besides that. However, there is like a whole report of what happened. Basically, they show up, they start making fun of them. A brick or a rock or whatever it was thrown into their car. That kind of stuff. And both of them ended up in the hospital. But as far as I'm aware, they were fine. However, the incident made national news, of course, adding to Oniontown's reputation, sadly. Afterwards, the state police investigator put out this stupid warning. Obviously, this was going to make everything worse.
Of course.
So he told the press, and I quote, "Anybody that doesn't belong there, anybody that's not a resident, just stay out of Oniontown." Dude, you know what you're fucking doing with that. Like, come on.
Yeah, these kids aren't going there to like be polite and like give people cookies.
Exactly. Like they're clearly going there because they think it's some fucking joke and they want to harass these people and they don't really care about the consequences because they're stupid teenagers. So after this, it basically inspired a whole frenzy of teenagers, mostly people who are from out of area too. Like it wasn't necessarily like the people in the area that were doing this. There was a lot of people, for example, again, we lived like 45 minutes to an hour south of this place. Like that's a decent distance away. And there's like, again, teenagers in the area going, recording, harassing them, tons of like videos being uploaded to YouTube. So in one clip, a teenager, of course, was recording and it's like pointed at the car's floorboards, but all you can hear is girls screaming at the top of their lungs, "Oh my God, fuck off, leave us alone." In the caption, basically it states that some guy started chasing them down the road and they blocked the car and threw a rock at their windshield. So Oniontown is kind of, as this article was saying, became a real life haunted house for bored suburban teens, which I think is a good way to describe it. So a girl got a brick to the side of her head, car windows were smashed and passengers were dragged out and beaten, stuff like this. Like there is plenty of police reports that back up all of this information. Like this is real stuff that did happen. Yeah, and it's just kind of sad. And it came to a point where the local police actually contacted, I think it was YouTube itself.
They contacted Google.
Oh yeah, contacted Google for these videos to be taken down so that kids would stop going. Which I guess it worked enough.
Yeah, you don't really hear about it as much anymore.
No. But like, the investigators at some point were just like, listen, like you kids are the ones fucking going and harassing these people. I know at least in the one that was uploaded, I remember reading in the caption, like the girl, they did file a police report, but the police officer was like, well, if you want an actual, like anything to actually be done, like we have to go back and find who threw the brick at your car. And she was like, well, no, I'm not going to do that.
Right.
And so I'm sure that's how most of the cases went. The kids are just like, no, I don't want to go back.
Right.
So yeah, it's pretty sad because really what it seems like is, again, just like a community of people who've just been there for generations, are uneducated, not really doing anything, not really interacting with anyone else in the outside world. I mean, due to them living where they are, so many of them can't even find jobs because of it. So like they kind of just keep to themselves. And even one of the investigators said, like, what would you do if someone came into your neighborhood and started doing donuts and making fun of where you live and calling you names? People came in and messed with them, and so they reacted, and then other people reacted back, and it just snowballed from there. It just sucks.
It really does suck, and it's really disgusting, like the way that these people are treated. And I just want to make a point to say that, like, these people are not inbreds, right? They don't have crazy yellow eyes. They don't have disfigured bodies. They don't have, like blood dripping from their fangs or whatever people want to say about them. They're just regular people who may be lower income. And of course, like you're saying, it may be hard for them to find jobs. So of course, they're going to be a lot lower income. They're kind of secluded in a lot of ways. They're like up a mountain and kind of cut off from the rest of the community. But at the end of the day, they're still regular people doing regular things, having their own lives. And that doesn't necessarily allow anyone to come into their community and harass them the way that they've been harassed. And I think that was the point of doing an episode like this, was to talk about how disgusting that is, and to kind of bring awareness to the fact that, like, you can't just like bully someone because of like where they live and just get away with it too. Like, sorry, but these kids absolutely deserve to have their windows bashed in and like to honestly be beaten up. They're going into a territory that is, there's no reason for them to be there. There's no reason for them to be there at all, right? Like, it's a completely dead end dirt road. There's nowhere for you to go. Obviously, if you're going down the road and doing something there, that's fine, but like, there's no reason for you to be there unless you're going to one of these houses for a good reason, and like, of course, like, I don't know, like, if I was one of these residents, I would also be throwing fucking rocks and bricks at people's cars. Like, how dare you come into my town, my community, wake up my children, call us names, like, are you kidding me?
Absolutely. And like, from all accounts, because actually, interestingly enough, Vice did an article about this back in 2012. So you can also see how long all this has been going on. But they actually were able to do an interview with some people in Oniontown, which is pretty interesting. So we'll link it in the show notes. It's a pretty good article. But the writer had also interviewed the like Dover town mayor. Was it the mayor? Sorry, the town judge. And he had, of course, like, in his younger days, I guess, he had started his own little business. It was like a little shop, basically. And he said, and I quote, "When I was a teenager, they were always bullied. I remember experiencing some situations where a certain girl would be deemed less than accepted because of her Oniontown status. But they, more than anybody, supported me when I started the store. They shopped here. They were our friends. To this day, I'm indebted to them. They're not looking for something to set them higher in some social arena. They're genuine. They're real." So again, this is like personal accounts. Like, they're just people. Sure, they might be like a bit uneducated, but like, not for nothing, if this is a little community in like bumfuck Alabama, they probably would not be seen as anything different.
Yeah.
Like, if this was in like a more like rural type of area, I don't think they would have had the same reputation as they do being in a weird spot of a wealthy area. And I think that's part of the problem, unfortunately.
Yeah. And, when we were talking about this, I brought up The Wonderful Whites of West Virginia.
Yes.
And if you haven't seen, it's The Wild and Wonderful Whites of West Virginia. If you haven't seen this, it's a documentary. You can just Google it and you'll find a free version of it. I think it's on like Tubu or Tobu or something. But if you just Google the title, you'll find it. It's a really fascinating documentary about it's basically a family that lives in West Virginia, and they have risen to some sort of fame in a lot of ways because the father of this family was an acclaimed tap dancer, and so was one of the sons as well. But they're very similar in a lot of ways because the whites are very secluded. They don't do anything. They don't play by the rules of like the law and stuff like that. A lot of them kind of work for basically themselves, doing like their own things. And if you watch the documentary, it goes deeper into it. But they remind me a lot of that, except to me, what it seems like is that Oniontown's even less than that, because the whites of West Virginia, they are more like choosing to be outsiders or choosing to be kind of outcasts. They had like a tough life. Like the father passes away very early when like a lot of the kids were young, and the mother couldn't necessarily wrangle all the kids that there were. And so like they kind of all had kids very young and stuff like that. But they very much like are proud of their white name. They're very, loud people. They like to be the center of attention. They also like to be outcast. They like to be like, oh, we're so bad. We're the baddest. We'll beat you up and kill you if you do something. Whereas like the people of Oniontown don't seem to be so much like that. Right. But of course, it's very similar in the way that it's like they're kind of secluded from their neighborhoods and from their communities, and the police often even don't want to deal with them because they're just like too much.
Right.
But it does seem in a lot of ways that they're separate in the fact that Oniontown people have not necessarily chosen this lifestyle. It's almost been chosen for them, which I think is very fascinating in an area like Westchester, Dutchess, whatever you're talking about, because of like the affluency that has steadily increased over the years, and it's only increasing specifically with the pandemic. People are moving out of New York City and moving upwards more and more and more. And as we see more affluency kind of increasing in these areas, we also see a lot of people, like people from Oniontown, but also just a lot of people in this community who are being kicked out, looked down upon, and shoved out of their own communities. And it's very, very sad. And in a lot of ways, Oniontown has almost persevered through all of this. And I think that it's a very beautiful thing. But I also think it's very sad that like people now say like, or think that they can just do whatever they want because they don't look and think and act just like the rest of us. And they're not wearing fucking Hollister and whatever else. I don't know it's popular anymore, but that was like when we were in school, Hollister was like the big thing, and it was expensive and flashy. And like, just because someone's not wearing that doesn't matter,
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And like you were saying, like the people of Oniontown, from my understanding, like didn't really choose per se to live there necessarily. So from my understanding, the stigma of like the inbred situation comes from a rumor that the family that like originally like lived in this area was inbred. Can't say that that's true or not, but basically in the 1950s is when I think she's the one that's called like Mama. Her name's Ethel Smith. She's the one that moved and bought up the land and started her own community family there. And so basically it's just extended family. I believe there's also some children that come there because they had broken homes or they had incarcerated parents. They might be abused and something like that. And they arrive in Oniontown because they have nowhere else to go. So of course, this is a community of people who are kind of outcasts in other means too. A lot of them, some of them do live on welfare and disability checks and stuff like that, but for the most part, they actually live off of their own land, hunting and breeding animals. I'm sure they have their own gardens and stuff like that they grow from and stuff like that. They don't really interact too much with the outside world or outside society, town, whatever, which again just adds to the stigma. But at the same time, it's like they keep getting harassed and abused. So what else are they going to do besides just keep to themselves? Unfortunately.
Yeah. And I think that's really fascinating, especially that first part about the kids who kind of move in, because that's exactly what Bertie Mae White did. And Bertie Mae White is the head of the White family in the Wild and Wonderful Whites of West Virginia. She's kind of like she's like the actual mother, but she's also known as a mother in the community because she would take in hundreds of kids, just anyone who needed a home and needed somewhere to stay, even if it was just for the night or if it was for long term. She raised so many kids, and so many people can account for that. And I think that's really interesting that this is also something that happens in Oniontown. And that's something to really be said about our society, that like these communities that are seen as like lesser than, that are uneducated, that are, the salt of the earth, right? Like these people who are looked down upon are the ones who are actually taking in the kids who really need it. And, there's no one who I would know from MAPAC, maybe like a handful of people who had taken children who needed it.
Right.
I couldn't tell you, like, off the top of my head, I couldn't name one family that would do that.
Yeah, unfortunately, which it's pretty sad, but like it also kind of does make sense because I feel like people who like go through shit understand other people who go through shit and therefore like have the empathy for it. I don't know, it's just sad because like you even see or hear rumors about, like, for example, like Oniontown being full of like drugs and this and this and that, when like, because there was one quote from that same town judge from Dover who said, like you get one person from Oniontown getting a drug charge and the whole rumor starts that it's infested with drugs. You get someone shooting a deer at a season and they're called lawless. Like these rumors just spread and are exacerbated. And you know what? I'm sure there are people in Oniontown who use drugs. But you know what? There was people in the back of my fucking history class using drugs.
Literally.
So I don't want to fucking hear it. They're all just people, you know?
And there's kids in my classes who were also like doing like crazy shit.
Yeah.
Like crazy shit. I mean, there used to be stories of, and this wasn't like rumors. This was I heard this from a EMT in the area. This would happen very often. They would have those like Skittle parties. Have you ever heard of Skittle party?
No.
So a Skittle party is when everyone at the party brings like their own drug and they put it into a bowl and you take a handful and then you just do it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And that was common. Yeah. And like I personally have not been to a Skittle party.
I feel like that sounds like something we would do.
Yeah. It's something I've definitely like probably have almost been to, but not like quite invited. But yeah, that's like very common for our area. There's a lot of drugs in our area. And of course, like we're so close to New York City. And I mean, honestly, like I would say that there's more drugs in suburban areas than in more urban areas. Realistically, like of course there's a lot of drugs in urban areas, but suburban areas are infested because, like we were saying before, a lot of these kids are bored. They just have nothing better to do. And on top of that, from what I've noticed and what I've experienced, there's also this idea that reputation is so valuable that like if your kid is hurting, number one, you kind of are like, well, you can't be hurting because we are affluent and we have like all these resources, and like you're not allowed to be sad.
It's which the whole, like there are children in Africa
right
deal.
And then there's the other side of it is like, well, if you go to therapy, what will my friends think about me? What will the family think about me? everyone think about me if you're in therapy, like it's going to look bad on me, so you can't go. And it's like really ridiculous, and that's how a lot of these problems and a lot of these issues begin. But then to like then look down upon someone else for doing basically the same thing that you're doing is absolutely ridiculous. And in a lot of ways it's self-preservation, you know. And I do find that very common in suburban areas like that, where they're always looking to look down on someone else because they're being looked down on by people who are a little bit higher than them class-wise. And it's like, bro, like that's just continuing the cycle, you know?
Exactly. And I see that especially in our area, because our area was that like weird mix of people who like genuinely were affluent, and then people who were like dirt poor, and then kind of people in the middle who were like struggling to like keep that status, but like not being quite there. Because it is just like, again, like a lot of people who move like from New York City, and like Westchester itself is like the super like wealthy county, but like Putnam and Dutchess are kind of like the like younger siblings that like want to be the top dog but just aren't. So I think that plays a lot into it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's very much to be said about like specifically our county, because we're so close to Westchester that a lot of people like know these people in Westchester, and they know like all these, like, I mean, there are some wealthy people in our area. I think it's one of the wealthiest counties in the nation, if I'm not wrong about that. But you know, like I said, like Putnam, or like you said, Putnam and Dutchess are not as affluent, but they kind of have those like wannabe people, and then they also have those people who are struggling just to survive, you know. And it's very ridiculous. So you can see the class wars that really are stirred up by this, and it's absolutely asinine, because it's like, who fucking cares? Like we should be taking care of each other, not necessarily like fighting against each other for status. And the fact that that's something that's like come about out of all of this is like absolutely ridiculous. And then what's even more ridiculous is to take that out on people who are like then deemed lesser than everyone, including like the lesser people, quote unquote, in Putnam and Dutchess guys.
Yeah. And again, like I don't like necessarily want to play devil's advocate or anything, because fuck the teenagers who are going up there and harassing these people. But at the same time, like it's kind of on their parents as well.
Oh yeah.
Because like that's what these kids are taught. And like there are plenty of adults, especially in the area, who would say the same shit. Like even you can actually find the one at least YouTube video about a couple of kids going, fair warning, it's incredibly irritating to listen to. They all just are super fucking obnoxious. But they were going on their little trip to Oniontown, and they stopped at whatever it was, like a McDonald's or something like that beforehand. And they talked to a group of guys who say the same shit, like, oh, like they're like inbreds, like, oh, like you don't want to go there, they're crazy and this and this and that. But like when they first drove in there, nothing was really even happening until they started blasting their stupid horn. And that's when people came out. That's when people got frustrated with them. Because again, it's the same thing. It's like if you're going to harass them, of course they're going to retaliate.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point, that like a lot of the adults of this area play into a lot of these kids' fantasies. Because honestly, at the end of the day, like, you know, of course, like kids are stupid and like whatever, but your brain isn't like formed all the way. And so of course you're going to do stupid things, and you're going to do reckless things and dangerous things. Like that's just kind of like being a kid is. Even if you're like a goody kid, right? Like someone who's just like home all day, like you're literally still probably going to do something at least once in a while that's reckless and stupid, because your brain's not fully formed. You're still testing out the world. You don't know any better. And at the end of the day, like it's really up to people who are older to guide you and to make sure that you're making the correct decisions, but that you're also learning from your failures. And the fact that so many people, not really even just from our area, but I'd say collectively, are number one, so unhelpful when it comes to failure and how to pick yourself back up again and how to learn from the lessons that come from failure, but also who are really like perpetrating these toxic ideals of, oh, these people are lesser, oh, these people are this and that, oh, like here's all the stories that we know. It's like, well, you're just like creating this issue now, and you're creating the divide that we see now in a lot of ways today, in so many different communities and so many different sects of people.
Hi guys. So the last bit of this episode got a little bit cut off. So basically the moral of this story here is to leave people the fuck alone, because they're not as different as you think they are. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode, and we will see you next time. Bye! Thank you for listening to Bell on Earth, the podcast. We hope that your minds have been expanded and your pussies have been opened.
Be sure to rate and follow the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music.
This podcast is brought to you by Free Studio Productions. It's hosted and produced by Cassidy and Casey Bell. Big thanks to our executive producer, Dark Benton.
Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook for all of your content needs. See you later, haters.